Good evening or good morning in this case. Thanks first to the organizers because they were brave to go farther and keep on doing the conference. Okay, I'm going to talk in these 20 minutes about a recent TV series called Chernobyl. Perhaps you're aware of it and probably you've watched it, 5 episodes released on HBO. And I'm going to focus on the aesthetics of sacrifice. The one of the ideas surrounding Chernobyl that, as you could know, is trying to reenact and retell that disaster from 1986 in the Soviet Union. And the whole narrative is full of tragic heroes, people who sacrifices themselves in order to get a higher good. You can see there the miners, the firefighters, here some scientists trying to prevent the first moment of the nuclear accident. Also Lyudmila Ignatenko in the part up right of the slide. So the idea with all these images is to show you that tragedy is an essential part of the narrative. What I'm going to focus here is how the idea of sacrifice is showing also from an aesthetic point of view throughout the whole narrative. So first, as you will see, and I will focus on one example, but you can take this same idea and apply it to several other sequences. But first, you will notice that when a sacrifice is about to be shown in the screen, the first thing that takes our attention is that the idea of ritual. We see somehow a rite being performed in front of our eyes. We're gonna focus, and that's why I began with the word rite, the ritual, in almost the very first sequence from the narrative. We're gonna just show it. It's a little clip, and then we will comment on that. Oh, sorry. Here we go. Okay, so the idea of the ritual is very well explained in that sequence, because you have the main protagonist waiting for a moment. That's very important. He wants to hang himself just 2 years after the accident. He's getting dressed, and it's somehow a ceremonial way of facing death. As I'm telling you, that idea, that structure, that ritual structure is gonna occur in several other moments when the narrative shows sacrifices. Think for 1 second in the those three soldiers um, killing the pets, the dogs. Think about the old woman, the farmer. She keeps on doing what she's doing in a very ritual way. She's taking the milk from the cow while the world is evolving around her, and the soldier is trying to take her out to save her. So first is the idea of the ritual. Then we have also, and it's present in the sequence I have just shown, the idea of symbolism. Um, Throughout the whole narrative, we, the audience, are gonna see a lot of stills or images that are full of symbolism. For example, the one on the left with the deer and the cat on the couch is the very first image we see in the series. Or we have that close up from the recording device, the handkerchief with blood. Or, for example, later in the narrative, we can see how some animals, and that's a very usual thing that Chernobyl does, how several animals adopt a kind of symbolic meaning. A dog pursuing, like, you are following your master. A bird, that's the end of episode 1, that is collapsing, like he, in this case, the animal cannot do anything, it cannot fly. Or the deer that it's getting trashed by the nuclear expansive wave. And in the last episode, or second to last episode, you have also a caterpillar that symbolizes somehow the rebirth of hope, the rebirth of that community that is being literally erased from where they were living. So the symbolism in the first sequence is powerful because you have to pay attention to several details that are shown using insert shots, usually objects, details from one of the characters. In the first sequence, there are two very that they also can work as symbols, but you have there in the left the clock, and you are focusing on the exact moment when Legasov is going to kill himself. And it's not a coincidence. He wants to do it in that exact moment because he's trying to apply meaning to his death. Also, that detail from the ashtray and the cigarette that is so closely associated with the character is also full of meaning. That smoke that is going away in the same way his life is doing it. My point is that several times during the narrative, in those moments of sacrificial scenes, when we watch people facing a certain death, there are these shots, these details that Craig Mazin, the author, wants the audience to focus on because they are meaningful. Finally, the fourth and last feature that I want to highlight in this aesthetics of sacrifice that we are focusing, let me remind you on the first sequence as an example, is the idea of the ellipsis. It is interesting to point out how we don't we don't see the accident until later in the narrative. Of course, the creators are playing with our extra textual knowledge. We all know what happened, more or less, in the Chernobyl accident. But it's telling that they decide to begin the story just in the moment and where the accident is happening, but we don't see the accident. We are watching how the people are reacting to the accident, mainly this firefighter and his wife from their house. So the idea of ellipsis is going to be essential, and Craig Mazin is trying to tell us, hey, this is going to be elliptical in many ways because in the first sequence, kind of a cold open, the one we've seen, we don't see explicitly how Legasov is dying. We hear how he is hanging himself, and we watch a detail that is kind of symbolizing his life. We are watching his glasses, a little glimpse of one of his boot, and very tellingly, the camera goes after the cat, a cat that is going to appear in several moments during the narrative, during the series. Why? Because of that symbolism I was telling you about. So we will have those four main characteristics in several sequences. For example, the one at the beginning of episode 4, The Happiness of All Mankind, when this angry soldier is trying to evacuate the old woman. If you watch, we don't have time to watch it now, but if you play the whole clip, you will see details, insert shots, a lot of symbols. There is, of course, a cat. There is also another symbolism about the cow that is finally the one being sacrificed. Something similar happens in one of the most potent and I think brilliant sequences in the whole series. Also in episode 4, there are more sequences we could talk about with all the mining guys, or with those brave soldiers that only have 20 seconds to try to clean the roof. But in this one, the one with the young soldier killing the dogs, again, we have the ellipsis. We don't see how the dog is shot. We have also the idea of how the narrative is trying to convey meaning through symbols, such as the dog in himself. There is also a cat, by the way, or how the parallelism between the inside of a house and the landscape, that is a void landscape in that moment, is playing tension inside the narrative, and it's resonating with everything that is happening in a more political sphere inside the narrative. So the idea of the aesthetics of sacrifice beyond the grim atmosphere, beyond the gray tones that are pervading the whole narrative, are those four elements. You have rituals that are being performed, that it's like part of, from anthropology, it's part of the sacrifice, is somehow a ritual, sometimes to go for the scapegoat part of the sacrifice. Sometimes it's much more a heroic sacrifice, but also you will have the symbolism, motifs such as vegetable motifs or house motifs, indoor motifs, little objects. And the narrative is going to focus on those, usually through insert shots. And finally, the ellipses. That is very interesting how such a hard to swallow narrative usually goes into the ellipsis territory instead of being so explicitly. And all this aesthetics, of course, has to do with how the whole series is talking about truth, is talking about how some, in this case, political figures are taking detours to lie to their people, and mainly how the idea of sacrifice is very important to how the Chernobyl series is read by the audience. Because at the end, and we've seen, for example, the character of Lyudmila, that woman, the firefighter's wife, whose baby in her womb dies because the baby somehow attracts the radiation, and it serves to let her mother live. So all these ideas, the whole Legasov storyline has to do with self-sacrifice for the common good, are part of these aesthetics of sacrifice that are playing with how the narrative is dealing with serious themes such as patriotism, loyalty, truth, guilt, and all those things that make Chernobyl such an interesting TV series. I will be here for questions, so if you want, just let us know how to proceed. Thank you.